Hello everyone, and welcome to Project Insight's product training webinar. Our topic for today is build your first project, or figure out what's the perfect fit. Once you find the right tool, building projects is easy. Just a few things to note before we get started. All participants will be put on mute. However, any questions you have are more than welcome. Please type them into the questions box, which you can find on your GoToWebinar panel. Also, do know this webinar recording will be available within the Project Insight community. My name is Chanel, and I'll be your moderator for today. I'm currently the sales assistant here at Project Insight. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to reach me at chanel.harrell@projectinsight.com. Our presenter and trainer for today will be Cynthia West. Cynthia is the VP of Sales and Marketing at Project Insight, and over 14 years at the company has had thousands of client interactions from the evaluation process through implementation and success. She's going to share some of her insights on best practices for getting your team on board with a new solution. Okay. So before we get started and I hand this over to Cynthia, I'm going to put this out to our audience. We're going to go ahead and just ask you a few questions. First question is, what's your greatest challenge when managing your projects today? Is it the amount of manual work, you never know what your others are working on, or project status? Or maybe your system that you're using is too complicated and you don't know how to use it, or mark all of the above, or go ahead and put any others in the questions box. I'll leave that for you guys open. All right. It looks like we've got quite a few answers in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this out, and we'll see our results. So it looks like our audience said, as a majority of you, 40% of you said that your greatest challenge is you've got too much manual work. 30% said that they don't know what others are working on or project status. 10% said that the tool you're using right now is too complicated and you don't really know how to use it. And then we've got 20% that said all of the above. So that gives us a good idea of kind of what's going on. Okay, and we've got just one more question for you guys before I hand this over. We just want to know, how are you guys currently managing your projects? Are you using Excel, maybe Microsoft Project, a low-end or entry-level tool, or sticky notes, whiteboards, napkins, kind of anything you guys can get your hands on to write on? And again, any others, please type them in the questions box. All right, we'll go ahead and give that a few more seconds. Awesome, we've got some great interaction. All right, going to go ahead and close this poll out, and we'll share our results. So currently, we've got 29% of our audience using Excel, which we've seen 43% using Microsoft Project. We've got 7% using maybe an entry-level or lower-end tool. And thankfully, we don't have anybody using sticky notes or whiteboards or napkins. And we've got 21% of our audience using others. And a couple that they have mentioned were Smartsheet in Salesforce, as well as Clarizen. So I'm going to go ahead with those results. I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Cynthia to continue with the rest of today's webinar. Welcome, Cynthia.
Hey, welcome everybody. Okay. All right. Okay, so one of the reasons we wanted to poll you guys is to see what kind of challenges you're having out there, and we're not really surprised with the answers, but the common challenges that we see from our prospective customers that come to us is a lot of them don't have an enterprise project management solution at all, and that makes things very chaotic. Like 40% of you said there was too much manual work going on. When you have single user applications like Excel and Microsoft Project that are great for single projects at a time but nothing centralized, you have disparate systems. Like you might have files on the network and you might have your projects in Microsoft Project and they're really not talking to each other. So that can be quite chaotic when you don't have an enterprise tool at all. Then there are entry-level tools that are good for basic needs but might lack functionality for slightly more mature teams. A lot of project managers report that they're chasing people down for status updates. That turns them into a glorified administrator, so basically running around and saying, what % complete are you on that, or are you finished with that? Whereas having a centralized system will let team members report their updates on their own. A lot of people don't have any way to collaborate together, and finding email to be quite challenging, where communication is spread out in your inbox, and even if you put subfolders and files in your inbox, that information is disconnected from your project schedule and your other things that surround your projects. On the other end of the spectrum, we have found that there are many tools that are high-end tools, a little too complicated to use or understand. That can be problematic as well. A good high-end system is a great place for a more mature team to be using, but not so much for mixed teams. And then, as we said, there's too much manual work. So one of the things that you want to take a look at is asking what the right tool might be for your team to use. And we see the market as having 3 basic tiers: entry-level, mid-market, and high-end. So the entry-level systems are things like Basecamp and Smartsheet, where they're doing a handful of functions well: task management, collaboration, alerts, and some other basic functions, depending on which tool you're looking at. Then on the other end of the spectrum, as I said, you have the high-end systems that might be 100,000 and up and require a fairly mature project management team and process to really benefit from. The good news about high-end systems is that they have a lot of portfolio analysis and risk analysis, benefits analysis, that sort of thing, where if you work at Procter & Gamble and you have 10,000 new product ideas a year, you need a good way to assess which products to go forward with. Now, Project Insight's more in the mid-market. There are some good mid-market solutions out there for sure, and it's the right blend of project management, task management and updates, resource management, issue management, budgeting, and reports and analytics. The other piece of the puzzle comes to, as I've been touching on, a little bit about your team maturity level. So there's something that the PMI, the Project Management Institute, calls CMM, which is Capability Maturity Model. And that's a scale from 0 to 5 that talks a little bit about how mature your organization is. Now, entry-level tools are great if you really don't have any process put together whatsoever. You need a good place to start. You can start there. Those are very inexpensive, sometimes don't offer enough support for a team, but they can be a great launching point and far better than Excel. Then again, on the high end of the system, the CMM really needs to be between 3 and 5, and that means that you have project processes defined, documented, templates that are reusable, and so on. A good example of a high-end team would be NASA or, say, Boeing. Boeing, that's putting together airplanes, if their projects don't go the right way, the airplane could have a defect and human lives could be at stake. So they need to have a very high level of project management maturity, say a 5, and that would also then require a fair degree of complexity for their project and portfolio management system. Now, more in the middle, which is where Project Insight resides, is the mid-market. Again, we work with a lot of teams that have a capability maturity model of 0 and then help them get up to 3. And then sometimes people come to us with an idea of project templates that they might already have, and I know this audience has, there's quite a few users of Microsoft Project, so you guys might have some great templates to start with that you can readily import into Project Insight and get the benefit from that. We find that our customers tend to be folks that have maybe a couple of PMPs on staff. That's the project management designation for a professional project manager. And then the rest of the team is sort of just wants something easy to use, may not even understand what task dependencies are or Gantt charts, and that's kind of where we come in. So you do need to assess which level of tool would be right for you before you get going with enterprise systems. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about how do you get started with your first project. And one of the things that our professional services team does with our customers, if they don't have a template in, say, Excel or Microsoft Project, they might embark upon the WBS exercise just live with a client, get some sticky notes out, and have the whole team brainstorm about what tasks or what steps are in their process. And I'm going to just pause this screen for a second, and we'll go into the system itself. Okay, so what you can do is brainstorm those first activities. So I'm going to do that in here, and you can do this on a whiteboard, in a mind map tool, or directly into Project Insight or any other system, I'm sure. And we're just going to do a right click and add the project. And I'm just going to, we'll create a really simple one for a brochure. And naturally, this is not the subject of today, but you can select a project from a template, and that'll just carry over all the tasks for you so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And because there are a lot of Microsoft Project users on the webinar today, you can also import your Microsoft Project schedule directly into Project Insight. But for today, we're talking a little bit more about building your first project and kind of brainstorming and how you would do that here in the tool. So I'm going to go ahead and I just give it a name. I'm going to make this a project template, which would then mean I can reuse it over and over again. So let's just go ahead and click Save and Display. And you'll notice that I've got the name of my project here and a task list view and just pretty much a blank shell here. So what I might do first is say, well, you know, what are the stages or what are the phases of my project? And when I go to create a brochure, you know, maybe I have a graphic design phase. So I'm going to type that in there, and I'll go to the little clipboard here, make that a summary task, which is just a fancy word for making something bolded and allowing you to group tasks underneath it. And I'm going to go ahead and see how that arrow clicks down. I'm going to go ahead and collapse that and create another summary task, which is writing my copy. And again, I'm just going to make that my second summary task. We'll go ahead and do that. And we'll go ahead and put a version 1 or draft 1 in as a summary task. And then version 2, say, for review. And, you know, put client approval, say. And we'll just add one more, like kind of a closing task. So if you do know the phases or stages of your project, it's a good idea to put those in here. And as you can see, it's very quick to do so. This line turns gray. You just type in the word and go from there. All right. So now let's say we're with our team and we want to kind of brainstorm the steps that might be a part of this process. So you can simply right-click. I did that kind of fast here. If I go to the task I want to put that underneath, I right-click on it, and that brings me that context-sensitive menu here in Project Insight. And you'll see that I can add it as a task successor. I'm not going to do that right now. I just want to nest it underneath. So let's just say I'm going to write, you know, first draft copy. And if I happen to know how many business days I want to give that resource, I can plug that in. And how much work or effort that's going to be. So I think I'll give that person a week, but it's really only, you know, 8 hours of work, if that. So you can see that I'm using that inline editing here. So Then I might say add another task. In this case, if I do want to connect it as a successor to first draft copy, I can connect that readily. And you can see that it's connected that first draft copy to manager review. So we can either brainstorm all of the tasks and then connect them later, or we can connect them if we do know that they are linked together already. Now, since we have a lot of Microsoft Project users on the line, I'm going to show you a little trick. So this is our page display options. I'm going to go in here, and you have lots of choices and of how you want to view your project schedule. And so what you can do here is, let me just say, if I wanted to add the description field, say, I can come along here and just double click and add that field and hit refresh, and that'll give me a new view here. So, but what I'm going to do for our Microsoft Project users is come in here and I'm going to choose my quick selection called predecessor by number. And bear with me if you're not a Microsoft Project user, but this is a really handy and quick way to build out your first schedule. So let's just say add another task in here. And you can see that there's a number that's being placed here. And if you're used to Microsoft Project and setting up your dependencies by number, you can do that. So let's just double click on the first draft copy, and we'll put the number 9 in there, and that basically is going to connect create ideas to first draft copy. So just to kind of verify that in the Gantt chart view, you'll see that those tasks are now connected. This is just a very familiar paradigm for Microsoft Project users. And if I were to say, let's just add another task for fun here. I can come along here and use that same functionality of Microsoft Project and say manager review and client review maybe are happening at the same time. So I'm going to use that shortcut for start to start, this is exactly the same way that you do that in Microsoft Project. And you'll notice that those tasks are, they're happening in parallel like that. So it's just as easy to create your ideas for your first project here right in the tool, and then add your linkages and dependencies later if you wish. And like I said, if you don't know what the dependencies are going to be, you can just simply come in here, add new tasks along the way, and then if it turns out that this task is really in the wrong place, you can also drag and drop them to locate them in the correct place. So, and you can see this is our drag and drop icon, and I can indent it so that things are nested underneath. And you'll notice that anything in bold is a roll-up of the items underneath it there. So we see 8 and 8 equaling 16. Okay. Now the cool thing about this, let's say that's my template. You see the dates are here for today, but let's say we know this isn't really going to get started until April. So I can come into the project schedule, and let's just say it's going to start that first week of April there. And I'll hit save and display, and what that does is it'll automatically shift everything out, and that's what we call our intelligent scheduling. So for people using Excel, this is a huge advance over Excel, because if you're putting start dates and end dates in columns, then that's a pretty manual process. That takes a lot of time, whereas when you're using Project Insight, you do have that intelligent scheduling. Then for those people that are using Microsoft Project, the beauty of it is it's very closely, it's working as closely as much to Microsoft Project as is humanly possible, even though it is our own algorithm for sure. Okay. And once you get your template built out, you can put your resources on the project, and you can use the quick add function. So let's say everybody in the company is going to work on this or potentially be a part of the project. And remember, we called this a template, so we may want to have anybody on our company be at least in the resource pool here. Okay, so it's very easy to add your resources to the project. And then the other best practice is to add what we call the resource type. So it's very much the same as Microsoft Project in that sense. Let's go ahead and add the resource type column here. And we'll hit refresh. At this point, you can add the skill set required for that task. So in this case, it's a graphic designer. And graphic designer again. And here you'll notice it's a content writer and so forth. And what we're doing here, it's very zippy, as you can see. I could either hit the save button here, or one of the shortcuts that I've been doing is basically just clicking on the next cell that I want to have Project Insight turn gray and allow me to do the inline editing. So that saves you a click or two here and there, and gets it so you can really move along quickly with your editing. So you can see I can either hit the edit button. That'll access the global list here. And this is a task for the client, say, and so forth. Now, if you do use the resource types or skill sets in your templates, then when you're launching a new project from this template, you can very readily assign people to tasks with that skill set. So I'm going to go here. And just let's say John, I'm going to pick him, and I'm going to ask Project Insight to bring me all of the tasks that require a graphic designer, and I'm going to mass assign him to all those things. So we have 2 here just because we've been building it here on the fly, but it could be 20, 200, it doesn't matter. And we'll go ahead and hit save, and when we pop back to the task list view, you'll see that he's been assigned to those things that call for a project, or excuse me, graphic designer. So that's a really quick way to get your first project started here in Project Insight. So we did want to emphasize, obviously, Project Insight's powerful for project managers, but easy for everyone. And pop back to our screen here. And you'll see that it's very easy to create a project in Project Insight using that inline editing. And then once you do have your template in there, either from building it from scratch, as we've shown you today, or importing it in from Microsoft Project, you can then kick off that same project from that template over and over, which will then provide you with a standardization of your processes. Then I did show you how to change up your columns on the task list. You can do the same thing in the project Gantt chart, and this will help you to get everybody on the same page as far as the stages of your project, the typical types of tasks, and allow them to provide their task updates in real time. So we have a couple moments for questions, and I want to go ahead and give you guys a few minutes to think of something.
Cynthia, I do have one question. As far as the columns go and being able to see what you want to see, are each team members able to kind of customize their view so they may have a different one as opposed to somebody else? Just kind of the
yes,
flexibility.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Project Insight's very flexible that way. So if I log in and I see the default task list, when I go to change those columns, I'm going to go ahead and see that project with those columns. That will not impact anybody else's view at all. And if I log back off and I log back in, it's going to remember that I wanted to see that project in that way or that view. It's also project specific. So if I choose to have one project showing all the budget columns, I can do that. On another project, I may have other things that I want to see on a regular basis. And then I can also set particular views as my global default. So hey, if I want to always see all of my projects a certain way, I can set that up. And I can also, if I'm an administrator, I can push out a different global view for everybody. Then one of the things that I did there in the system very quickly was I picked the predecessor by number view from something we call a quick selection. The quick selections, you can have an unlimited number of those so that you can quickly pop to different views at will. So very, very flexible that way. Yeah, thanks for the question. Any other brave people that will have a question?
Another minute or so. Okay, we do have a question coming in. Are you able to expand on inline editing for reporting? Okay. We've got that question.
I'm not sure I understand the question entirely, but let me see if I'm heading the right direction, and then the person that asked the question, we can certainly, you can clarify in the question box if you wish. So the reports have very similar function as the task list, and this is one of the nice things about Project Insight is that once you learn something in one screen, you've automatically learned it in so many other places. So it's very straightforward and easy to learn. I'm going to go to a default report. These are some of the out-of-the-box reports that come with the system. There's quite a lot here, but I'm just going to pick something really simple, which is the project dashboard. And you'll see that there's one line per project here. Now, again, same icon as before. When we were on the task list, you'll see this throughout Project Insight. This is your display options. And you open this up, and it's very straightforward to report. You can pick reporting by a specific organization, client, or entity. You can come in and pick projects by their state or status. You can say, hey, I'd like to see projects that are only for a particular project sponsor or project manager. Lots of options here. We want maybe to see just things by a particular department. And the same thing is happening here with the columns. So, for example, if I want to add actual hours column to my report view, and again, this is kind of all my projects in the portfolio, I can add any column from the left and push it over to the right. And then I can also enable the inline editing in this report. So let's do that, and I'm actually going to also add a group by department. And we'll run that report. So without calling IT, we can run this report, and you'll see kind of the same functionality here that we had on the task list in terms of customizing the view. And then you'll see certain behaviors here that are exactly the same as the task list. So I'm not sure if I hit the right question, but if that's not exactly what you meant, we can probably clarify there in the box if you wish.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, my apologies. Yes, so clarifying, that clarifying question was, so they know there is inline editing is an option for PI reporting for project reports. question is, can you expand on what you can use inline editing in the reports? That was a clarifying, make it a little bit more clear. The question.
Okay. So a really common use of inline editing is on issue reports. And let me just make sure I've got it invoked. Let's invoke it. And one of the things you can do on the issues report is simply, change particular fields right from the report itself. So I've got to put a resolution on the issue in order to close it, but you get the idea. So yeah.
All right. I think that we were able to answer the question. Oh, we've got one more question. Do we have time for one more, Cynthia, in regards to that?
Sure.
Okay. So what about companies and departments? Can you change a PM in there? I assume they're speaking to this report.
Like who it's assigned to? Yeah. So, I mean, you can even come here and change the name. So yeah, I think that's good for today, guys. I appreciate everybody's time, and I know Chanel has a couple more slides, so I want to make sure we have time for that.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and if you do have any questions, I can let you know how to go ahead and ask those. Alrighty. Yes, thank you, Cynthia. So before we end the slide, I have a few more slides for you. For our PI customers, if you have any questions on this webinar, please post them to the webinar forum, and I can go ahead and break that down for you at a later time. But for those on social media, I'd like to invite you to follow, like, and subscribe to our social media channels. Our handle on Twitter is @ProjectInsight, and of course, you can also find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for the latest on PI news. If you're not already a PI user and would like to learn more, please feel free to contact us via phone, email, or request your demo at projectinsight.net. In our Project Insight community, you'll find many recorded videos and webinars for you to watch and learn from. You can sign up for your next product training or check out the rest of our webinars by visiting our PI calendar to register for as many as you'd like. That's all we have for you today. We'd like to thank Cynthia for a great session, and of course, thank our audience as usual for your time and participation. We hope to have you on board for our next webinar. Thank you, and have a great day.